Well, we don't have a ton of time today, so we're going to go ahead, and we have two presenters here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Amy Barrio. I'm Communications Director at Clean Wisconsin, which is the state's oldest environmental organization. But before that, I was a television reporter, radio show host, and a spokesperson for the City of Madison and a spokesperson for the Department of Workforce Development. So a lot of time talking to the media. Today we're going to talk about storytelling. Yep, there it is. And I think that feels like kind of a buzzword in communication, right? We hear like, oh, we need storytellers, we need to tell stories. But storytelling is really important. It's a really effective way to communicate. And so I'm going to explain why that is, and then just share a few examples of some storytelling that we've done at Clean Wisconsin to try to push forward support of IRA clean energy investments. So next slide. Mm-hmm. So storytelling works, and the reason why is because of just the way human beings are. So we tend to use emotion more than facts to make decisions. We judge a lot of things by how we feel about them. We already communicate with each other with stories, so that's something that's been happening. Come on in. It's icy. It's early. So we already communicate in stories. So if something happened to you at work, you come home and you say, guess what happened to me at work today? And then you tell a story. And we've been doing that for thousands and thousands of years. In fact, it used to be like the main way that we pass down information from one generation to another. So we are primed to accept stories. And then there's this trust thing. So people trust the people that they know. And if you communicate and somebody doesn't trust you, you might as well not even be communicating, right? So what a story does is it gives a chance for people to get to know the storyteller, and then they develop a level of trust, and that's really important. Trust is the key to communications. Next slide. So we're going to look at trust just a little bit. So trusted source is something that especially journalists really like to look for. And when I talk about a trusted source, typically you might hear somebody say, well, I want to talk to a real person. You might hear that from a journalist, a real person. I'm not a real person in a journalist's eyes. I'm a spokesperson. I'm an advocate. Sometimes I'm an expert, but I'm not that real person, because a real person doesn't have like a dog in the fight. They're not the expert. They're just sharing their experience with a topic, in this case, clean energy. And so the trusted source is important because you want to find somebody who people automatically will resonate with. And human beings are most likely to trust people who are similar to us. So people who are within our community, our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, other community members, and then the leaders that are very much within the community. So business owners is a big one, doctors, farmers, church and community leaders. So this is kind of like where you really want to go if you want to find a storyteller. These people who are trusted, as close to the community as possible. So, next slide. Mm-hmm. What can you do? Because most of you in here, from media's perspective, are not real people. You're probably experts or advocates. You know a lot about a topic. So what you can do is find those real people, those trusted sources for the media. So it means doing a little bit of legwork, but it's important to have advocates for clean energy who are not developers or installers or climate advocates, but who are just people who are coming at this with curiosity and not a ton of knowledge, but who will share their story once they experience the benefits of clean energy. So I'm going to give some examples. Next slide. So at Clean Wisconsin, we wanted to do some storytelling around clean energy benefits in the Inflation Reduction Act. And so for the past couple of years, that's what we've been doing. So what do we do when we want to tell those stories? Well, first, we wanted to find some people who had really experienced the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we reached out to Eland Electric up in the Green Bay area, because I knew that they installed, solar, and said, do you have anybody who would talk to the media about their great experience with solar and then getting benefits, tax credits from the IRA. And so they were like, yeah, sure. So they hooked us up with 4imprint, which is a big employer up in the Brown County, Appleton area. So they've got trust, right? They are close to the community. They are an employer. And and so then I reached out to WBAY TV. This was Earth Day. And I'm like, you looking for an Earth Day story? Why don't you go over to 4imprint and talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and how important it is for business owners and everyday folks to kind of get involved and get some of these benefits. And so they did live shots from outside 4imprint's very impressive solar array. And in this moment, Brian here at 4imprint is our storyteller. He is our trusted source. He doesn't make money installing solar. He isn't a climate advocate. He's just a business owner who's trying to do what's best for his business. Eland Electric was also interviewed for this story, so they were the expert voice in the story. Next slide. So Eland Electric had another person they thought maybe WBAY would like to talk to. His name is Bruce, and he lived up in Algoma. And he'd been doing a lot of, cool upgrades, some solar and things at his home. Well, WBAY didn't have time to go all the way up to Algoma. But I thought, why don't we go up there? So we, and by we I mean Logan, who's sitting right there, went all the way up to Algoma and talked to Bruce. And Bruce shared his story. And so we took some video, we put it out on our social media, and then later my colleague Jacob wrote an op-ed about clean energy and American energy independence. And this op-ed got picked up not just by the Journal-Sentinel, but by USA Today, and then shared in newspapers all across the country. And if Jacob had just written this from his perspective, I don't think it would have gone as far. But he included what Bruce had to say. And I don't know how well you can see Bruce in this picture, but Bruce looks just like a regular Wisconsin guy from Algoma, right? He's somebody who people can identify with. He's just a guy who saw the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act and said, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to get everything I can out of this climate bill. And so because Bruce's voice is so much in this op-ed, it gave this op-ed a hook, a storytelling hook that was really important and that made it successful. Next slide. This is another example. So this is here in Madison. Again, we reached out to Airtight Exteriors about the insulation benefits of the IRA and said, do you have anybody who would talk about that? And so this homeowner had not even really heard of the IRA. He just had a problem with some insulation and really needed to get it taken care of. But he agreed to talk about it. And so if you're a homeowner sitting at home and you've never heard of the Inflation Reduction Act and you just watching the news, you can identify with this person. You can see yourself in him. And so, again, he becomes the storyteller and the trusted messenger. He's like you. He's in the Madison area, he's owning a home, and he's maybe got an insulation problem. And then he can talk about, oh, wow, I feel so good. Now my installer told me that I can get some tax credits for this and some benefits. So he was the storyteller. Accurate, airtight interiors or exteriors was quoted as the expert in the piece. And then I was also in that as the environmental advocate role. So everybody's got like a little bit of a role to play as these stories come out. And then I think I have one more example. Yep. So this was an event that we did on the 2-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act. And so same kind of pattern, right? I'm doing some legwork. I reach out to Sun Peak and say, do you have a place where we can have an event? Not just like have it here at Monona Terrace, but a place that will be like a story. So a place where people benefited from the IRA and can talk about it as part of the event. And she said, yeah, Black Business Hub here in Madison. Dr. Ruben Anthony, maybe he can speak at the event. I was like, that's great. And so when it came time for the TV station to do a story, there was all kinds of people who spoke at this event. I mean, like people from the governor's office, people from, experts, technical experts, all kinds of people. But the person who was on the TV was Dr. Anthony, because he was up there talking about, I've got this nonprofit. I wanted to do what's right. I wanted to help transition to clean energy. I wanted to save money for the nonprofit. I took advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act, and here's how. And so again, he becomes the storyteller of our event and of the media coverage, because he's not, got any kind of benefit from the clean energy transition except from being an everyday nonprofit director. And so I think that's how you can understand how storytelling works, right? It's giving that perspective of somebody who's just kind of coming at this just like the viewer is. They learned about it, and now they're sharing what they learned. And so in a second, I'm going to turn it over to Cass to talk about, how to be in the media, how to be in a media interview and make the most of it. So real quick, usually when I do media trainings, I can give kind of a list of jargon that might be part of your industry. And so I have a little bit of clean energy jargon here. It's important to understand that your audience is not, does not work in this field. And so things, especially words like transmission, don't mean always power lines to people. They typically mean car transmissions. So you want to say what you mean. Renewable energy can mean switchgrass. It can mean biodiesel. Some people call nuclear renewable. But if you're talking about wind and solar, then say wind and solar if you're speaking to a general audience. So these are just another big one. Energy efficiency is a bit of jargon, so this is how you save energy or use less energy. And then ratepayers is a big one that nobody says. So just people or customers if you're talking about a certain utility. So again, try to think about as you're talking to the media, that language that you use at work or in your field may not be the language that people know. So now I'll turn it over to Cass, and she'll have some great tips on how to do some interviews.
Thanks, Amy. If I use this, can you hear me? Yes, okay. So I am Cass Bergman. I work with a firm called Miller Communications. We are based in Milwaukee. We're a full-service marketing and PR firm. We support clients across the state, from municipalities to nonprofits, excuse me, to the biggest client that I actually work on is the Clean Economy Coalition of Wisconsin, which is a group of clean energy and environmental groups from across the state, many of whom I see some very familiar faces in here. So how do we secure stories like the ones that Amy is talking about here? I think for some of you, question for the group before I dig in. What comes to mind when you think of talking with the media? Yeah, nerves. What else? It's early, but I know you can do it. Anything else? Just nerves? Just not knowing what to think going into a conversation like that? Yeah, go ahead. Distortion. Great. Yeah. So we always say when I do media trainings like this, the media isn't your enemy, but they're also not your friend. So I think just making sure that you know what they're looking for in a story and how to communicate with them just from the onset can really help set you up for success going into it. So before we dig into the actual tips about how to do some of these things, what's the media thinking right now? What is a journalist, they got a lot on their plates right now, so what are they thinking? So this is a poll from a company called Decision. It's a PR communications tool that we use to just honestly stalk reporters, see what they're working on, see what their contact info is. But every year they do a survey about the state of the media. And the results lately are kind of fascinating. I think this might actually be a year old, but what are the top challenges for journalists right now? So the top 3 things: fighting fake news, so that distortion piece, fewer resources. This is a big one. The newsrooms today are squeezed really, really tightly. You hear about a lot of layoffs, especially at traditional and legacy newspapers. Amy and I actually both talked to a reporter this week, Rick, at the Journal-Sentinel, who is, he's the Journal-Sentinel's clean energy reporter right now. But do you know what else is in his beat now because of the way that the newsroom has shifted? He covers ag. he covers manufacturing, he covers AI, that is a lot. That used to be 4 different people back in the day. Now it's just Rick. And, part of your job going into a conversation like this, even if you're not looking to get coverage, is to really develop a relationship and serve up spokespeople, resources, background information in a way that helps them successfully do their job. And last but not least here on this list is just that pressure to perform. Clicks are real. I mean, think of the things that you're engaging with from a media standpoint. The clickbait factor sometimes skews the things that people are going to write about, for better or for worse. So I think just having this picture in the back of your mind going in can be helpful. Want to spend a second here. So obviously different types of media outlets exist. There are different opportunities for you to think about how to deploy your message based on who you're talking to. So from a print standpoint, we at Miller actually think this can be some of the most challenging conversations to have, because you're relying on that journalist or that reporter to help translate your words. And so being really thoughtful and intentional about how you deploy that messaging is going to be key in a situation like this. For radio, there's 2 ways that radio interviews sometimes happen. A taped conversation. Sometimes they're live. So those present both of their own challenges. Some radio stations, not a lot anymore, they take callers. So think about that if you're sitting down for a radio interview too. So it's not just you talking with the reporter or the radio host. It might be you fielding questions from an audience who might not know anything about what you're talking about. So just being prepared is key there. And then for TV, everyone usually giggles when we always say this is the least challenging, because they're like, Cass, I have a camera in my face, this feels really aggressive. But it's usually pretty short and sweet. And you're usually hitting on those key who, what, where, when, what's the key takeaway. The biggest challenge I think that we've started to run into is that a lot of TV reporters are they're green. They're young, and they don't have that history in your area. They might be new to Wisconsin. They might be new to the city. And so, again, just thinking about how to build relationships with those folks and helping them do their jobs is really key going into those types of conversations. All right, so you've secured an interview. You've helped someone else secure an interview. Now what? Set the agenda. You might think, well, Cass, they're just going to ask me questions. Like, they're setting the agenda. No, they want to talk to you, and you can come in with your thoughtful perspective. And so what we always say is think about the quote or the headline that you want to see from that story. Is it Amy's point about, like, these federal benefits are really key for everyday people around the state? Or, there's a number of us in the room right now that are working against some new methane gas infrastructure that's being proposed in southeastern Wisconsin. Getting that in the headline and getting the fact that those methane gas plants are not what we need for our state's clean energy future, is that the headline? So think about what you want that to be, and then start to think about how you're going to deploy that headline or how you're going to dig in on that. What's your quick elevator speech? What's the bottom line message you want to deliver? What statements or things, anecdotes, explain your message? I think to Amy's point, real people are always going to be the most compelling storytellers because they can talk about their lived experiences. If that's not an option and you're the one that's having that conversation with the media, is there an anecdote or a stat or something else that can help explain your perspective to help share that, the real why and the real meat of the issue? This is a fun graphic, but so all of us are used to reading stories, writing our college essays where you really end with that big, strong finish, like that your key takeaway is usually at the end. When you're engaging with media, we need you to flip that. We need you to lead with that key insight or takeaway, because if you've got 2 minutes with a news reporter, they really need that key takeaway right away in your first few minutes or your first, literally 30 seconds. And so we really encourage people to practice. So write down, go back to this agenda setting. Go back Think of those few top-line messages you want to take away, and then practice delivering those if that helps you. Just a voice note, have someone pretend to be the reporter, your partner, someone at work, your kids. Just practice trying to deliver that key takeaway right away. Sometimes, though, reporters do have their own line of questioning, and so they might come into a conversation thinking that the story is one thing, and they might take you down a trail where you're like, you know what, this is actually getting away from what I'm here to talk about, right? I'm here to talk about X, they're talking about Y. How do I get it back to what I am here to talk about and what I can say? So we have two techniques that we talk about a lot. Bridging, so bridging back to your message. Excuse me, I have the sniffles that are obviously going around everywhere. Bridging to your message. So let's say they're starting to take you down a path you don't want to go on. How do you bring that conversation back to what you're here to tell them? So examples like that are, let me put that question in perspective. That's a really interesting question, but let's think about it this way. The real issue here is this. And so then you're kind of just nudging people back, bridging them back to where you would like the conversation to go. Another verbal cue is what we also call flagging. So think of it like big flag, like I want you to quote this, take this away from this conversation. And it's just using a couple of verbal cues or parts of just how you're framing up your responses to really focus them on the key issue. So examples of this are, I'm so glad you asked that question. This is really important because XYZ. Or, what's really important for you to remember and take away is this. Reporters will also, at the end, most print reporters at the end of, actually most reporters in general, at the end of your conversations, they'll usually ask, anything else that you want to make sure that I cover or take away? Even if you've hit on every single message that you want, your top three things that you wanted them to take away from the conversation, always use that as an opportunity to just hit your messaging one more time. Sometimes the folks that I work with, they're like, I'm starting to sound a little bit like a broken record in these conversations. Like I'm talking about, like I'm still using my same messaging over and over, and that's okay. Especially with a print reporter too. Like we want them to be very focused on what you're bringing to the conversation, and message repetition is your friend. Think about how you learn things too. Like it takes you a while to really, you don't learn or think about the key takeaway the first time you read something or the first time you engage with something. So you might feel like you're a broken record, but I think that helps with your you making sure that your point has been taken in that conversation. A couple other common phrases. Sometimes this helps people when they're prepping. So, thanks for that question. This is really great because, and then segues back into your messaging. Or what I really want to make sure that you take away from this conversation is use these tools to help you navigate where you want to go. Just a few cautions. So again, reporters, not your friend, or they're not your enemy, not your friend. Sorry, it's early. I'm so sorry. Just a couple things that they might say. Let's go off the record. You are all adults and you have free will and you can do whatever you'd like. We usually caution our clients at Miller, just don't go off the record. It's not a thing. It's not a legal contract. It's a reporter might think let's just talk about this off the record just so I can get it. They could use things against you. So just caution, beware. I know you see it on movies and TV and stuff, but we usually say, just not do that. The buddy reporter might just be really friendly and start to get you chatting on things. Really remember, stick to your messaging. They might want to hear about other things outside of your area of expertise. It's okay to not have answers. It's okay to say, these are great questions. Let me get you the appropriate person to talk about this. My area of expertise is this. It's not that. Dead air. This is one that you'll get quite a bit, especially with print reporters. They'll ask a question, you will answer, and then there's a pause. They're probably taking notes. They're jotting things down, making sure that they've got what you're saying down. Some people, though, who loves an awkward pause? It's so uncomfortable. Don't feel the need to jump in and fill that, because they might be thinking of their next question. Also, you feeling that pressure to fill that silence sometimes can just have you stray from your message as well. Loaded premise and negative questions. So these are things where a reporter will say, I've heard that, transmission lines cause all of these, birds and all these different issues, all these whatever. Don't repeat the question or repeat any of those negatives back in your response, because sometimes they'll get you quoted saying that negative comment in your response. It's a little tricky. It doesn't happen a lot, but just wanted to throw it out there. What are we on time? I'm gonna just skip to the end. Okay. Want to make sure we have time for questions. I know we've gone through a lot. It's early. Anything for Amy in terms of storytelling and narratives, media training tips. Don't be shy.
I can start, I guess. My question would be for Amy, sort of about storytelling a little bit. Part of my work is to not be the not real person and to get the storytellers to give testimonials. And so I guess I wonder if you have any tips for, again, engaging a real person, sort of to have them share their real experience while nudging them towards, the reason that you're interviewing them in the first place, trying to get them on a message that you want while still having to be in their own words. Any tips there?
I think, it's just about being frank, saying, hey, we're trying to get the message out so other people like you can have the same benefits. So would you mind talking to this reporter? TV especially can be intimidating, but reporters are really used to people being uncomfortable and really helping them. And they are not likely to ask a real person some of those kind of tough questions that Cass was laying out. They just want that person to feel comfortable and share their story. So just, we've had a lot of success just saying, hey, do you mind talking about this? And usually people are really excited to share their story, and that's great.
If you're working on a story where you're interviewing say a real person and then cross-checking it against the other side, you have two people telling essentially the same story in two different ways. How do you distill that? I guess it's fact versus truth, and then two sets of facts that don't quite say the same thing. What do you do with that?
So sometimes reporters will do kind of the both sides thing, right, where you have a positive and a negative. And, as a reporter, you just try to kind of present both of those things. And typically, if they're storytellers, it's not a fact versus fiction thing. It's this person likes this energy project, this person doesn't. The end. And so those are the hardest kinds of stories because they're just kind of pitting two storytellers against each other. What I think is helpful is, especially with the clean energy projects, you'll have a reporter go out and talk to a neighbor who doesn't like a clean energy project, and then they'll talk to somebody like me. Well, the neighbor is the storyteller. The neighbor is the one that people are going to identify with. And then here I am, somebody who lives in Madison saying, no, clean energy is good. From my perspective, that's not the best story that we want out there. So what we need to do is find the storytellers who are also in the community saying, I do want this project. I'm a neighbor. I'm a landowner. I want this thing. And so when they call me and say, can you comment on this clean energy project? I'll say, I can, but you know who you should talk to? This person out here in blah, blah, blah county. And so that takes some work. Again, that's that legwork part I'm talking about, where you kind of have to have some folks who've already contacted, who they would be open to talking about a project that might be a little bit controversial. And that's hard. But some people are willing to do that, especially I remember talking to a guy who lived next door to the Koshkonong place where the Koshkonong Solar Center was going to go. And he was ready to talk about it. He was thrilled that next to his yard was going to be a solar farm. And so finding people like that is what's really essential, because as much as like I can talk to the media about how great clean energy is, I am not that trusted neighbor, that trusted member of the community, and that's who we need to find.
Huge thank you for this session today. It was absolutely fantastic. Let's give them a round of applause.